far beyond the lands we know, past the golden shores and over the deepest blue waves, there lies a part of the ocean untouched by time. The waters there shimmer, not just with sunlight, but with magic. The winds sing softly, and even the dolphins speak in whispers. In the heart of that hidden sea lived a mermaid named Soraya. Wasn't like the other mermaids who played all day and gathered pearls from the seafloor. She was quiet, thoughtful, and curious about the world beyond the waves. Her hair flowed like seaweed in the current, and her tail sparkled with the light of the full moon. But what made her truly special was her voice, soft as a lullaby, warm as morning light, and filled with the secrets of the sea. Each night, Soraya would sit on a smooth rock near a coral reef and sing her song. It wasn't a song made of words. It was a melody that carried peace, a tune that wrapped around the waves, reached the stars, and settled gently in the hearts of all who heard it. But one day, the ocean changed. The water turned restless. The winds began to howl. The coral reef, once full of colors and fish, became quiet and pale. The turtles swam away, and the starfish clung tightly to the rocks. Soraya felt something strange deep in her heart. "The sea is hiding something," she whispered to the waves. She swam to the oldest creature in the ocean, a great sea turtle named whose shell was covered in moss and tiny shells from 100 years. Maran Soraya asked gently, "Why is the ocean troubled?" The turtle opened his wise eyes and said, "The sea holds a secret, Soraya, a treasure hidden long ago, not of gold, but of peace. Long before we were born, the sea sang its own lullaby, a song that made the whole ocean calm. But one day, the world above became loud. Ships came, engines roared, the sea's song was forgotten, and with it, the peace began to fade." "Can it be found again?" Soraya asked, her voice trembling. Maran looked at her kindly. "Only someone who sings not for herself, but for the sea, can awaken the song again." That night, Soraya returned to her rock. The sky was cloudy, and the stars were shy. The sea was still, but inside Soraya, the melody was stirring. She closed her eyes. She didn't think. She didn't try. She simply listened to the heart of the sea, the rhythm of the waves, the memories of coral and tide. And then she sang. It was soft at first, like a seashell whispering in your ear. But as she continued, the song deepened. It flowed through the water like a warm current. Fish peeked out from behind rocks. Crabs stopped scuttling. Even the moon broke through the clouds, shining down like a spotlight just for her. As the song spread, something beautiful happened. The coral reef began to glow. Soft pinks and blues lit up like underwater lanterns. Sea grass swayed in perfect harmony. The waves grew gentle and warm, like a lullaby cradling a sleepy world. And then, from deep beneath the sea, a faint hum answered her. It was the ancient song of the ocean, long lost, now returning. The ocean had remembered. Soraya's voice merged with the sea's, and together they created a melody so soothing. Even the winds above grew quiet. The noise of the world faded. For a moment, even faraway ships slowed down, the sailors fallen silent, listening to something they couldn't explain. Maran smiled from afar. "She has done it," he said. "She sang not to be heard, but to heal." When Soraya finished, she gently touched the surface of the water. The reflection of her face danced with the stars. And for the first time in many nights, the sea was at peace. From that night on, the ocean was different. It wasn't always calm. Storms still came, winds still blew, but deep in its heart, a gentle hum remained, a song that only those who truly listened could hear. Children sleeping by the shore would sometimes dream of soft music beneath the waves, and the waves, in return, would greet the morning sun with a quiet hush. Soraya continued to sing each night, not for applause, not for praise, but as a gift, a song to remind the sea of its own beauty, a melody for anyone lost in the noise of the world, seeking peace. And if you ever find yourself walking near the ocean at night, When the wind is gentle and the moon is high, close your eyes. You might hear it. A soft, warm lullaby, the mermaid's song, and the ocean's secret, singing just for you. One evening, many tides after the ocean's song had returned, Soraya noticed something new, a flicker of light in the distance. Not the moon, nor the glow of the reef, but something drifting slowly on the surface. She swam closer, careful and curious, until she saw it. A small wooden boat, gently rocking, with a sleeping child inside. His hair was tangled with salt, and his cheeks were pink from sun and sea. He held a seashell in one hand. Not a common one, but the kind that sang when held to the ear. His little chest rose and fell with calm, steady breaths, and around him, the sea was utterly still. Soraya hovered beside the boat, wondering how such a small human had come to this quiet corner of the world. The child stirred, and for a moment his eyes opened, wide and wonder-filled. They did not speak, but the moment held something truer than words. A recognition, like he had dreamed of her before. Soraya smiled and sang. Not loudly, just a soft hum like waves brushing sand. The child blinked slowly and smiled back before closing his eyes once more. With a gentle current, Soraya guided the boat back toward the golden shores, far beyond where time stood still. She sang as she swam. A lullaby of safe passage, of homecomings, of dreams held tenderly by the sea. When the boat reached the sand, villagers came running. "He's here," they cried. "The boy from the storm. He's alive." They never understood how he returned. He never spoke of a mermaid, but sometimes he would press the seashell to his ear and whisper, "Thank you," to the tide. And as he grew, the boy never forgot the song. Years passed. The world remained loud. Ships came and went. Cities brightened and engines hummed. But on some nights, the quiet ones, when the stars leaned in and the sea listened, the song could still be heard. It passed from wave to wave, carried in the hush of tides and the hush of hearts. Soraya, ever gentle, ever watching, continued to sing. She sang for lost things that longed to be found. She sang for aching hearts and weary travelers. She sang for the sea and for those who believed in its magic. And now, dear dreamer, if you still your breath and open your heart, you may feel it too. That same song winding through the waves, soft as memory, strong as love. For the ocean never forgets kindness, nor does it forget a voice that sings not to be heard, but to heal. So if the world feels too heavy, too loud, walk to the water. Listen, she is still singing, just for you. Always. As the years flowed on, tales of Soraya's song began to drift ashore like shells after a tide. Sailors swore they heard music in the mist. Children spoke of dreams, where a silver-tailed mermaid hummed them to sleep. Even the elders, the ones who had long stopped believing in magic, found themselves pausing at the shore, heartbeats slowing, eyes softening. Among them was a girl named Neva, quiet like Soraya once was, never lived in a seaside cottage with her grandmother, who told her stories of the sea, of wise turtles, glowing coral, and a song too ancient to write down. Every night, Neva would sneak out to the dunes, curl her toes in the sand, and wait. She didn't bring a lantern. She didn't speak. She just listened. One evening, as the moon poured silver over the waves, Neva heard it, faint and far away, like a dream half-remembered. She followed the sound down the shoreline, heart thumping gently, not with fear, but with hope. And there, sitting on a rock in the distance, was Soraya. Her back was to the shore, hair flowing like kelp in the moonlight. She sang to the sea, unaware of the eyes watching her with wonder. Never dared not move. She simply stood there, breathless, letting the song fill her like the tide fills a tide pool. Slowly, lovingly, completely. And Soraya, though she did not turn, smiled. She felt the presence behind her, a child of the land, drawn by the pull of something deeper than waves. From that night on, Soraya's song had an echo, soft but growing. Neva began to hum it during the day, when she wandered through tide pools or skipped stones across the bay. She didn't know the whole melody. No one could. But she carried it the way one carries a secret, close to the chest and warm with wonder. Others noticed. Some joined in. A fisherman began whistling as he mended his nets. A baker sang softly while kneading dough. A baby fell asleep to a tune her mother didn't remember learning. Without knowing why, people became gentler. Storms still came. Waves still crashed. But now, on quiet nights, whole villages could be found with windows open and ears tilted toward the sea. Soraya watched from beneath the waves, her heart full. The ocean was not only remembering, it was teaching, sharing its song not just with her, but with all who listened kindly, humbly, and with love. And so the lullaby grew, not louder, but wider, not bolder, but deeper, not shouted, but shared, a gift passed from tide to tide, from voice to voice. And somewhere in that melody, in a note you might hum while walking alone, or a rhythm you feel in your chest when the wind touches your face, Soraya still sings, not for fame, not for thanks, but for you, for every part of you that aches quietly, for every hope you've buried beneath noise, for the softest, truest part of you, the one that still believes. And if you ever wonder if the sea remembers you, it always has. Many moons passed, and the sea grew older, as all things do. But it never forgot. It remembered the voices that sang with love. It remembered the children who listened. It remembered Soraya, not just as a mermaid, but as its heartbeat. One evening, as dusk painted the waves in violet and gold, Soraya swam deeper than she ever had before, past glowing trenches and sleeping whales, past forests of kelp that whispered in slow syllables. She was following a feeling, not a path, a pull like gravity, but gentler, as if the ocean itself was calling her inward. At the ocean's deepest point, where even light was afraid to go, Soraya found a cavern made of crystal coral. It pulsed with a soft blue glow, not cold, not dark. It felt like a cradle waiting. Inside was a single pearl, enormous, luminous, resting in a bed of soft sand. It hummed faintly, as if dreaming. Soraya approached slowly, and then she understood. This was the sea's heart, the oldest song, the first memory. It had waited patiently for someone not to claim it, but to honor it, to keep it alive, not in treasure chests or stories carved in stone, but in music and kindness and quiet care. Soraya sang. She sang the lullaby once more, but this time it wasn't just for the waves or the winds. It was for the pearl, for the sea's oldest dream. As she sang, the pearl began to glow brighter, warmer, until the cavern itself shimmered like a star. Then, with a gentle pulse, it opened, and inside was not gold nor gems, but a single drop of living water, pure and ancient. A tear, perhaps, or a memory, or both. Soraya reached out and touched it. In that instant, she saw everything. The birth of the waves, the laughter of dolphins, when the world was new, the first time sunlight kissed salt water, and she saw all that was still to come. Ships guided by songs, children born beneath stars, shorelines where voices would rise in harmony with the tide. She did not speak. She did not need to. The sea had chosen her not because she was powerful, but because she listened, because she sang not to be praised, but to remind. When she rose from the depths, the ocean itself shimmered, waves sparkled, whales breached in joy, coral bloomed in colors unseen by land, and above the stars burned brighter, as if they too had heard the melody. Soraya returned to her rock, her voice softer than ever, but her song more powerful. Now, the sea carried a lullaby, far and wide, across oceans and islands, through storms and calm. It reached sailors drifting too far from home. It reached children afraid of sleep. It reached dreamers and wanderers and hearts full of questions. And whenever it reached someone who truly listened, they sang it too, in their own way, through art, through kindness, through quiet strength. For the ocean's lullaby is not just a sound, it is a promise. That peace is never lost, that beauty can be remembered, that even the deepest parts of the world still sing. And so, wherever you are, if the world grows heavy and the days feel loud, walk to the sea, or a river, or even just a quiet place in your heart. Close your eyes, breathe, and listen. She is still there, Soraya, the mermaid who sings, the voice of the sea's heart, still singing for all of us, forever. And so the lullaby moved, unseen but felt like a tide within the soul. Seasons changed, the moon waxed and waned, generations passed, but the story of the singing mermaid was never lost. Some told it as a bedtime tale, dressing it in silver scales and fantasy. Others whispered it by candlelight, unsure whether they believed, but always comforted by the telling. And a few, the rare few who still walked slowly by the shore, who listened more than they spoke. They knew. They didn't need proof. They had heard her. Among them was a boy named Fallon, born to stormy skies and a restless heart. He often wandered the cliffs near the sea, watching the waves crash below, feeling the ache of something he couldn't name. He didn't speak much, but he listened well. To the wind, to the gulls, to the hollow hush of conch shells. And one evening, when the tide was out and the stars were bold, Fallon heard the song. Not loud, not sudden, just a single note, as clear and fine as glass. It hovered in the air, wrapped around his ribs, and made something inside him still. Without knowing why, he followed it. Down the rocks, over tide pools, barefoot across wet sand, until he reached the edge of the world. And there she was. Soraya stood in the shallows, hair glistening with salt and starlight, eyes like tide pools. Her song had no language, yet Fallon understood it completely. Every note was a feeling Dee'd never been able to say aloud. Longing, hope, belonging, peace. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Instead, she reached out a hand. Fallon hesitated, not out of fear, but wonder. And then, quietly, he placed his hand in hers. The ocean rose to meet them. Together, they slipped beneath the waves, not sinking, but gliding, as though carried by a current older than time. Fish spiraled around them in spirals of light. Coral opened like flowers. The water held them gently, like breath. And down there, in the blue quiet, Soraya showed him something few had seen. The chorus, dozens of voices, mermaids, whales, sea dragons, even the wind, joined in the song. Not loud, not sharp, just one endless, shared note of harmony. Each voice different, each voice needed, each voice real. Fallon, who had never felt like he belonged anywhere, finally understood. This was not just a lullaby. It was a call, a homecoming, a reminder that no one is too small to bring peace, that every whisper matters. When he returned to land, the sea released him gently. Soraya waved once from the surf, then slipped beneath the waves, her song lingering in the hush of the tide. Fallon never forgot. He grew older, not famous, not rich, but kind. He played music that made people cry softly and smile without knowing why. He walked the shore every night, humming, and in quiet moments, when no one was watching, he sang her song, and the sea sang back. For even now, in our world of noise and rush, the melody remains. Tucked into sea foam and starlight, cradled by wind, waiting in dreams. And if one day you feel alone or lost or uncertain of where you belong, go to the sea, close your eyes, listen. You might hear it. A hush, a hum, a home. The song that sings of peace, of memory, of end of you. Years drifted like sea mist across the shore. The world changed. Roads lengthened, Cities sparkled taller, and voices grew louder with progress and pride. Yet beneath it all, the sea kept singing. Some no longer heard it. Too busy, too hurried. But the lullaby never left. It waited, and sometimes, in the most unexpected places, it found a way through. In a hospital room, where a child lay quiet, a nurse hummed an old tune. Soft, wordless, and strangely familiar. The child smiled in her sleep. In a faraway desert, where there was no ocean, a boy traced wave patterns in the sand, not knowing why, only that it felt like remembering. And in a city full of light and motion, a lonely man sat by a fountain, listening to the splash and whisper of water, as if it was speaking just to him, because water remembers, even far from the shore, even when the waves seem lost. The lullaby flows on, not as noise, but as presence, a thread of stillness, a song of home. One night, when the moon was just a sliver, and the stars blinked slow and patient, Soraya surfaced again. Her hair was longer now, trailing like comet-tails behind her. Her voice deeper, quieter, wiser. She sat upon her old rock, worn smooth by time and tide, and listened. Not to the sea this time, but to the land. And she smiled. There were new voices now. Young ones, old ones, human ones, animal ones, all singing in their own way. Some painted, some wrote, some simply sat still and breathed. But all were part of the lullaby. Soraya sang with them, not louder, but lower, like a harmony, holding everything together. Her song no longer needed to rise above the world. It wove into it, and that, she knew, was the greatest magic of all. Now, the mermaid rarely shows herself, not because she is gone, but because she no longer needs to be seen to be felt. She is in the hush before sleep, in the warmth of tears that fall for no reason, in the silence after laughter, in the stillness that follows a storm. She is not a legend. She is a rhythm, a remembering, a song that has become part of the world's breath. And if you ever feel the sea inside you, not just in your ears, but in your heart, deep and steady and calm, then you are part of it too. So listen kindly, live gently, sing quietly when you can, because somewhere out there, across the waves and beneath the stars, Soraya is listening, and she smiles every time she hears her song. Not echoed, but continued by you. Time, like the tide, moved on, and in small, quiet ways, the world began to change. Not all at once, not in loud revolutions, but in ripples. Slow, certain, steady. A fisherman who once roared across the bay now turned off his motor just to glide and listen. A school teacher began. Her lessons were a moment of silence, where students learned to hear not just answers, but one another. A sculptor who had never seen the sea carved waves into stone with such tenderness that visitors said they could hear water in the curves. They didn't know they were echoing a song, but the sea did, and so did she. Swam deeper now, watching, listening, guarding the quiet chorus that had begun long ago with a single voice and a single hope. One evening, as the stars spilled like lanterns across the sky, Soraya visited the place where the sea first taught her. Its melody, the old coral reef, once pale and still, it was blooming again, not just with color, but with life. Fish darted between towers of seagrass, tiny anemones pulsed gently in the currents. Even the turtles had returned, drifting like slow dreams through the water. Elder Moran was gone now, his shell resting near a reef edge, worn smooth by time, surrounded by pearl-bright sea moss, but his wisdom still lingered in the waves. Soraya often passed by and offered him a note of her song, a thank you whispered through the deep, because it was not her voice alone that had brought the sea back to peace. It was the listening, the remembering, the many who heard and chose to carry the tune forward. And though Soraya's lullaby was ancient, it was never finished. Far across the world, in a place where children slept above rooftops rather than waves, a girl named Mira dreamed. She had never seen the ocean, only pictures, only books. But in her dreams, it called to her. Soft, blue, familiar. And one night, in the space between sleep and waking, Mira sat up in bed, opened her window, and began to hum. She didn't know the tune. She didn't need to. The melody came not from memory, but from something deeper. From the hush between heartbeats. From the silence that holds a wish. Somewhere far below the waves. Soraya heard it. She paused, listened, and smiled. Because she knew the song would never end. Not as long as someone, somewhere, chose stillness over noise, gentleness over power, wonder over fear. Not as long as someone sang, not to be heard, but to heal. So now, if you ever find yourself alone or lost in the hurry of the world, remember this. The lullaby is still with us. It flows in quiet rivers, hums through trees, drifts in the breeze that touches your cheek at night. It lives in every soft voice, every kind act, every soul that dares to pause and truly feel. It lives in you. And when you close your eyes, you might hear it, Soraya's song. The sea's secret, the melody of peace, still singing, still waiting, still calling you home. And so, the song passed from voice to voice. Not always sung aloud, but lived. It took shape in 1,000 different ways. In the hands of a gardener who spoke gently to her soil. In the brush of a painter who painted the sky, not how it was, but how it felt. In the pause a mother took before raising her voice, choosing instead to listen. In the silence shared between old friends, sitting by the shore, needing no words at all. The world was still loud, still rushing, still forgetting. Sometimes, but wherever someone remembered to listen, truly listen, the song was there, and the sea knew. Beneath its surface, Soraya still swam, older now. Though age meant little to the ocean, her eyes held centuries. Her voice had grown richer, woven with the sounds of every creature who had ever joined her in the song. She no longer sang each night alone, perched upon her rock. She didn't have to. Now, she sang only when the world needed reminding. When the waters grew restless, or a heart somewhere began to crack under the weight of too much noise. And when she did, the ocean would hush, and the wind would still. And far away, without knowing why, someone would sigh in relief and feel whole again. One such night came with no warning. A great storm gathered over the sea, not born of weather, but of sorrow. A sadness had grown in the world above. Too many people speaking, not enough listening. Too many lights, not enough stars. The ocean felt it, aching. And so Soraya rose. She broke the surface, beneath a sky choked with clouds, and opened her mouth to sing. But something was different. This time, her voice alone was not enough, so she listened. Not just to the sea, but to the world above. And slowly, it answered. From across the continents, across deserts and cities and sleeping villages, the song returned. Not in perfect harmony, but in pure intention. Children humming to themselves as they drifted to sleep. A stranger helping another across a busy street. A poet leaving a verse in a bottle by the shore. A musician pausing mid-performance, struck by a melody they didn't write but somehow remembered. They had never seen Soraya, but they knew the feeling of her song. And that was enough. Together, their voices joined hers. Not loud, not flawless, but true. And the storm quieted. The sea breathed in and let go. Afterward, Soraya returned to her reef, where soft coral glowed like lanterns once more. She sat in the shallows, watching the stars return to the sky. She felt no need to sing. The lullaby had outgrown her voice. It lived now in the hearts of many, woven into the choices people made when no one was watching, in the gentleness they offered to the world when they thought it didn't matter. And so, Soraya rested, but she is still there. And if you walk by the sea, or sit quietly in the woods, or lie in bed while rain taps your window, if you close your eyes and listen, not just with your ears, but with your spirit, you may hear her. Not a song, exactly. Not words, but something older, softer, truer. A reminder that peace is not something found. It is something remembered, and it is always, always singing, waiting to be heard by you. Seasons turned, and generations came and went, as they always do. Names faded from stories, places changed, and even the ocean's edges shifted over time. But some truths held steady, like the moon's pull on the tide, or the hush just before dawn. Among those truths was Soraya's song. No longer bound to one voice, it became something greater. A quiet force, gentle and unseen, carried in the hush of lullabies in the breath, between laughter and tears, in the hands of those who build instead of break. And somewhere, on a quiet shore, untouched by roads or noise, there stood a child. Her name was Lull. She had hair, the color of storm clouds, and eyes like tide pools, deep, curious, and ancient in some small, quiet way. Though she had never heard the tale of Soraya, the ocean called to her like a forgotten friend. She spent hours by the waves, toes buried in cool sand, watching seabirds trace invisible songs across the sky. She didn't speak much, but she listened to wind, to water, to the soft secrets the world whispered only to those who waited long enough to hear. One night, as the moon rose full and golden, Luma wandered further than usual to a quiet cove where the rocks sang with the sea. There, she saw something, a shimmer beneath the surface, not of fish or light, but of presence. And then she heard it. Not a melody, exactly, but a feeling, a memory, like something she had always known, but had forgotten to miss. She stepped into the water. The tide welcomed her like a friend long lost. Foam curled around her feet like a gentle question. And deep below, something stirred. Not Soraya, not exactly, but her spirit, the echo of a song sung long ago, now alive again. This time, and the child didn't speak. She didn't need to. She closed her eyes, she breathed, and then, softly, she began to hum. The tune had no shape, no beginning, no end, but the ocean recognized it. The stars paused to listen. Far across the world, in quiet bedrooms, in wind-swept fields, in the hearts of those holding on to something fragile and wordless, people felt it. That deep, grounding peace. That hush that says, you are not alone. Because the lullaby had found another voice, and it would keep finding them. In those who listen, in those who love without reason, in those who believe in something even when they can't name it. So if you ever feel a calm rise in you without warning, or you hear a song you can't quite remember but know you've always known, perhaps it's Soraya, or perhaps it's Luma, or perhaps it's you. Because the lullaby never ends. It simply waits in the quiet, in the stillness, in the spaces between the waves, waiting for a voice to carry it onward, waiting to be heard, waiting to heal, waiting to sing with you. And so the song traveled, not like lightning or thunder, but like roots beneath the earth or tides beneath the surface, unseen but unstoppable. It found its way into the hands of an old man repairing boats with care. No one noticed. It rested in the eyes of a midwife who sang gently to each newborn before she passed them to their mothers. It wove itself into the sketchbook of a quiet boy who drew waves with colors he'd never seen but somehow felt. And though they never spoke the name Soraya, they knew her, not as a mermaid, not even as a story, but as a presence, a knowing, a memory of something ancient and kind and needed. One evening, far from the sea, in a city full of glass and humming lights, a girl stood in front of a microphone on a small stage. Her hands trembled. The world, she felt, had become too loud, too fast, too sharp. But inside her, something was calm. So she closed her eyes, and she sang. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't planned, but it was true. And in the silence that followed, someone in the back of the room wept without knowing why. In that moment, the lullaby lived again. Not in the notes, but in the space between them. The space that held softness. The space that made room. Beneath the ocean, Soraya swam slower now. Not because she was tired, but because she no longer needed to race the silence. She had done what all true singers hope to do. Pass the song on. Not by holding it tightly, but by letting it go, trusting it would land where it was needed. She often visited Elder Moran's resting place, brushing seagrass gently from his shell. "I didn't finish the song," she once whispered. The reef shimmered softly in reply. "You weren't meant to, because songs, the ones that matter, are never finished. They grow. They change. They are carried forward in hands that build, in voices that soothe, in hearts that remember how to listen. And you, if you are reading this, you may already feel it, a stirring, a stillness beneath the noise. You may hear it in the rustle of leaves, the hush of waves, the steady rhythm of your own breathing. You may carry it without knowing. In your gentleness, in the way you speak when no one's watching, in the kindness you offer, even when the world rushes past, because you are part of the song now. You always have been, and somewhere, when the moon is high and the sea is calm, Soraya listens. She does not sing as often anymore. She doesn't need to. The lullaby is safe now, in voices like yours, in the soft, secret music of those who love the world enough to help it heal. So tonight, if you find yourself near water, or even just dreaming of it, close your eyes, breathe, and listen. The song is still there. It always will be. And maybe, just maybe, it's your turn to sing. Time, like the sea, moved on, ever shifting, ever returning. There came a day when a child stood at the edge of the world, where land met water and sky met soul. This child, neither lonely nor loud, simply watched the sea with wondering eyes. The child's name was not known in any tale yet, but the ocean knew them. The lullaby stirred faintly in their chest, though no one had ever sung it to them. They had heard it all the same in the quiet moments between stories, in the hush after laughter, in the steady rhythm of their own heartbeat. And the sea remembered. From its depths, the currents carried fragments of the song, not in lyrics, but in feelings. Calm, clarity, care. The child knelt by the tide and dipped their fingers into the foam. It tickled like a greeting. The wind brushed past their cheek. Not cold or hot, just kind. The world was changing again, growing louder in places. Yes, but wiser too. More and more people have begun to remember that peace isn't a prize to win, but a melody to keep. Some shared it with others with gardens, some with whispered forgiveness, others with a simple act of listening. The song had become a language without words, a thread sewn quietly into human hearts. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present, being gentle, being true. And in all of this, Soraya, the mermaid, whose voice once cradled the sea, watched from afar, her heart wide with joy. She had become more than a name, more than a legend. She had become a note in the great song of the world. Sometimes she still sang when the tides asked softly enough, but mostly she listened, because the world had learned to hum its own lullaby. And when storms returned, as they always do, there were more voices now to calm the waves, more hands to hold others steady, more hearts that remembered. The ocean may rise, the winds may shout, but somewhere beneath it all, the song still flows, waiting, always waiting, for someone like you. Because peace is not a place or a prize. It is a promise, one we pass forward in moments of care, in sparks of love, in the courage to be soft, in a world that forgets softness. So if you feel it now, that warm quiet inside you, hold it. And when you're ready, sing it. Not loudly, not perfectly, just honestly. And the ocean will hear you, and Soraya will smile. And the lullaby, ancient, endless, eternal, will go on. And so, in places both near and far, The song continued, not as a performance, but as presence, in the soft clinking of teacups, between friends who haven't spoken in years, in the hands that plant seeds they'll never live to see grow, in the quiet courage of someone choosing kindness when anger would be easier. The lullaby lived there. It echoed in libraries lit by morning sun, in shelters where blankets and warmth are passed hand to hand. It rang inside poems left in margins, and in the last pages of old books where children wrote their names, believing in magic. The song was not made to fix the whole world at once, but it was strong enough to hold the broken parts gently, and that was enough. Back beneath the waves, Soraya sat once more upon her rock. Older now, though the sea does not measure time the way the land does. Around her, the reef glowed again, not in blinding brilliance, but in the soft luminescence of life healing itself. The fish had returned. The sea grass danced. Elder Moran's resting place was now a haven for baby turtles, learning to swim. Soraya did not sing tonight. Instead, she listened to the hum in the water, to the laughter of a pod of dolphins passing by, to the memory of a melody once nearly forgotten, now carried by the world itself. The sea was not perfect. Storms still rose, ships still roared, but underneath it all, the song remained. It was there in every act of care, every word spoken softly when harshness would have been easier. Every time someone held a hand, dried a tear, or simply sat in silence so another didn't have to sit alone. And if you are ever unsure of your place in this loud, rushing world, remember this. You don't have to roar to be heard. You don't have to shine to bring light. You only need to be true to the quiet rhythm inside you, the steady tide of your own good heart. That is the song. That has always been the song. So tonight, when the stars appear, or when the lights go out, or when the world feels too heavy to hold, close your eyes, breathe, and remember, somewhere far beneath the waves, a mermaid once sang, and the sea, and the world, and you have never been the same since. The lullaby is yours now. Carry it gently, and when you're ready, share it with someone who needs it, even if that someone is you. The lullaby moved quietly now, not just through oceans and wind, but through time itself. Years passed, or perhaps lifetimes, and Soraya's name, like so many beautiful things, faded from spoken memory. But her presence lingered in a different way. In every village near the sea, there was always one person who seemed to understand the water better than the rest. A girl who spent hours watching the tides and humming to herself. A boy who drew waves that curled exactly like real ones. An old woman who told stories no one remembered telling her. And in cities far from the shore, some still dreamed of songs they'd never heard. Songs that wrapped around them like a warm blanket, leaving them calm for reasons they couldn't explain. They didn't know it, but they were part of Soraya's legacy. Pieces of the great melody that had touched the soul of the world. And perhaps they were her. Not in body, but in spirit. Carriers of peace, keepers of wonder, singers of unseen songs. One dusk, in a quiet cove, hidden behind cliffs no map marked, a young child stood alone. Their hands were cupped around a seashell, one they had found when no one else had looked. The shell hummed faintly in their hands. Not a sound, exactly. More like a feeling, like warmth, like love that asked for nothing. The child pressed the shell to their ear, and for the first time, they heard it, not with their ears, but in their bones. A note, a breath, a beginning. The lullaby had found a new voice. Somewhere deep below, Soraya smiled. Not because the world was fixed, not because pain had disappeared, but because someone, again, had chosen to listen. And in that listening, the song lived on. And now, dear dreamer, you hold the thread. Maybe you are not a mermaid. Maybe you've never seen the sea. Maybe your lullaby is a painting, or a garden, or the way you speak someone's name with care. That is the song. It is in every moment you choose. softness over noise, stillness over speed, wonder over weariness. So, when night falls, wherever you are, remember, you are not lost. You are not alone. You are part of a story older than time. You are part of the melody. You are the lullaby. Now, let it sing.
The child with the seashell didn't rush home that evening. They sat with the sea a while longer, their toes just touching the foam, their eyes on the horizon. The sound in the shell had changed them. Not loudly, not suddenly, but gently, like remembering something you hadn't known you forgot. When they finally rose and walked away, they didn't take the shell with them. They left it on a flat stone, open to the wind and tide, because they understood something rare. The song was never theirs to keep, only to carry, only to pass on. And pass on it did. It moved in circles and spirals, in waves of kindness and care. It drifted into lullabies sung to babies in quiet nurseries. It echoed in the rhythm of hands mending broken things. It flowed through the hearts of people who had never heard of Soraya, but lived as if they had. And still, every so often, someone would hear it by name. A sailor who dreamed of a girl with a silver tail and starlight in her voice. A grandmother telling a story that made the sea seem to lean in and listen. A lonely traveler who, on a night of no moon, heard music rising from a tide pool. They would ask, was she real? And the sea, old, patient, knowing, would only smile. Because stories like Soraya's are not measured in facts or fossils, but in how they shape us long after the last word is told. She is real, the way courage is real, the way peace is real, the way love that asks for nothing is real. She is every quiet voice that heals without needing to be heard. Every soul that sings not to be praised, but to remind the world of its beauty. And maybe tonight you'll hear it again. That song just below the silence. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably there. The mermaid's lullaby still floating, still glowing, still waiting to be found by the next heart that dares to listen. So listen. Sing, hear the sea, remembers. And so, now, do you?
Of course, the sea has more to say. And Soraya's lullaby continues like a thread of light in the dark. Let's follow it just a little farther. In the hush between one tide and the next, where the sea holds its breath, a voice once again rose. Not Soraya's this time. This voice was smaller, less certain, but true. It belonged to a girl with tangled hair and a heart full of questions. She stood at the edge of the sea, where the waves just kissed her feet, and she hummed. Not a tune she had learned, but one that had found her. One that had waited in the quiet places of her heart. The song was different now. Not sad, not sweet. It had grown. It carried notes of all that had come before. Soraya's love, the child's listening, the world's healing. And now, this new note, hope, far below. Soraya floated in the depths, eyes closed, arms open to the current. She felt the ripple in the water the moment it began. A new voice joining the ancient song. She smiled, not because she was needed, but because she wasn't. The lullaby lived on without her, and that was always the dream. Some say the ocean is eternal, because it is always changing. Waves rise and fall, storms come and go, shores shift, but the sea remembers. Not in words, not in stories carved into stone. It remembers in feelings, in the soft hush that falls when someone chooses to be kind, in the way the world seems to pause when two people truly understand each other, in the warmth that lingers when no one is looking, but someone is still singing. And now, the lullaby lives in many voices. Some soft, some strong, some broken, all beautiful. Because peace doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence, from choosing to show up with love, with grace, again and again. Even when no one hears, even when no one knows, just as Soraya did, just as you can. So if one day you find yourself near the sea, or anywhere the world feels too loud, too fast, be still for a moment. Close your eyes. Feel the pulse of the earth beneath you, the hum in your chest, the rhythm of breath, wave, wind, and if you dare, sing something, anything. Not to be heard, just to remember, the lullaby is still there, and it always will be, because once sung from the heart, songs like this never end, they just begin again. In places far from any shore, the lullaby still found its way. In a busy city where no one made eye contact, a street musician played a melody no one had taught him. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it made people stop, just for a moment, and breathe. In a forest, where the trees whispered secrets only the wind could carry, a child walked barefoot and felt, somehow, that she was not alone. She hummed without meaning to, and the leaves shivered with recognition. In a hospital room filled with beeping machines, a nurse quietly touched a patient's hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her presence was the song, and in the darkest corners of the world, places heavy with grief, with silence, with sorrow, too old to name, the lullaby stirred, softly, not to erase the pain, but to remind those suffering, you are not forgotten, you are not alone. Deep beneath the waves, Soraya swam one last circle around the glowing reef. Time had passed, not in years, but in stories. She had given all she had, and now she no longer needed to guard the song. It belonged to the world, to you. She rose toward the surface, her hair trailing behind like a current of stars. And as she broke through into the moonlit air, she took one last breath of sea and sky. Then, with a smile that held galaxies, she whispered into the night, "Sing gently." And with that, she vanished. Not gone, but everywhere. Now, whenever someone offers kindness with no expectation, whenever a hand reaches out, just because it can, whenever a voice dares to sing in the silence, Soraya is there. Her lullaby is not a single song anymore. It is 1,000 small ones, a hum in the kitchen, a soft good night, a pause before anger, a laugh in the middle of tears. All lullabies, all pieces of peace. So if you've read this far, know this. The story isn't ending. It's becoming you. And when the world feels too much, when the noise rises like a storm, when you forget what matters most, close your eyes. Listen. The lullaby is still there, waiting, soft as moonlight, steady as tide. Sing it back in your own way, and the sea, and the stars, and all who once needed it will hear you. Some say magic is rare, that it lives only in wands and spells, in old tales and ancient forests. But the sea knows better. Magic lives in choosing gentleness, in the stillness before a storm. When a heart decides to soften instead of close, in the way one person's calm can ripple through a crowded room, in the quiet courage it takes to care. That's the kind of magic Soraya left behind. Not the kind that changes things with a spark, but the kind that changes us, one breath at a time. And so the lullaby kept spreading, into letters written by lantern light, into lullabies whispered to sleepless children, into the pause before soldiers set down their weapon, into the hands of a stranger who stayed, even when they could have walked away. Each time, the song grew, not louder, deeper. It became a thread sewn into the world's very fabric, a reminder in the rhythm of the waves, a heartbeat in the hush between raindrops. One day, far from sea or story, someone will ask, what can one voice do? And maybe, just maybe, someone who remembers this story will answer, enough to calm a storm, enough to heal a wound no one else could see, enough to carry the lullaby forward so someone else can breathe. Because the song is not over. It never will be. Not while there are those who choose kindness, not while there are those who listen, not while there is even one soul brave enough to hum into the quiet. So when the night is heavy, When the world feels too far gone, when your own voice trembles, sing anyway. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be true. And somewhere in the deep, remembering sea, Saraya will be listening, smiling, singing with you. Years passed, maybe centuries. No one counted, because time flows differently where lullabies live. The waves still whispered. The stars still blinked their soft approval. And the world, though loud and wild and full of ache, still remembered the hush. Some remembered it only in dreams, some in the way their hearts slowed near water, and some remembered fully. These were the singers. They didn't wear crowns. They didn't command tides or speak to whales, though some might have. They were bakers, teachers, travelers, children, artists, midwives, and monks, people who lived with a listening kind of heart. And each of them, whether they knew it or not, carried a thread of Saraya's song inside them. They sang it in different ways, in how they touched the earth with care, in how they forgave what the world said was unforgivable, in how they stayed present through someone else's sorrow. No audience, no applause, just presence, just peace, just the echo of a melody born in moonlight. There's a legend now, quietly passed along among the very old and the very young, that when the world becomes too heavy, when the sea grows quiet, and the wind forgets its way, the lullaby will rise again. Not from one voice, but from many. A chorus of those who carry kindness like flame, a tide of small, soft songs, rising together until even the stars turn to listen. And when that day comes, the ocean will shimmer with more than just sunlight or magic. It will shimmer with memory, with love, with all the voices that chose not to shout, but to soothe. And maybe, if you're still enough, now, in this moment, you'll feel it. That pulse, that hush, that deep, quiet truth wrapping around you like a warm current. You are part of this song now. Your listening matters. Your gentleness matters. Your voice, however it comes, is needed. So go, not to find peace, but to be peace, to carry the lullaby into the noisy world and sing it forward. In a quiet cove that few maps remembered, a child sat with their feet in the water. They had not heard of they had not been told the tale, but still, they hummed, a sound barely louder than the breeze, a melody with no beginning and no end. Their heart ached in ways they couldn't name. The world had felt heavy lately, like clouds pressing on their shoulders, like questions with no answers. But here, by the sea, they felt something ancient rise to meet them. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a fix. It was comfort. The child looked out over the water, eyes wide, soul open, and the sea, older than sorrow, older than songs, whispered back, not in words, in knowing. Somewhere beneath layers of coral and memory, the reef glowed again, just for a moment, as if nodding, as if saying, the song has found another. The lullaby was no longer hidden in one place. It shimmered now in the eyes of those who chose to feel, who sat with pain and didn't turn away, who let their compassion ripple outward like waves. And so the world kept turning. Storms still came. Hearts still broke. But always, always, the lullaby was there. In shelters after wild winds, in lantern light after power failed, in laughter that broke through tears, in the silence between two people who simply stayed. And if you ever feel too small to matter, if your voice shakes, or your song feels lost, remember this. Saraya did not begin the lullaby, and she did not end it. She heard it, she trusted it, and she sang it forward, just as you can. The ocean doesn't ask us to be perfect, only present, only willing to hold a little bit of peace for someone, for a moment, until they are strong enough to pass it on. That is how the lullaby lives, not as a performance, but as a gift, a choice, a whisper, a light. And now it's yours to carry. So when the world grows too loud, stop, breathe, listen, then sing, however softly, because somewhere, someone is listening, and they are waiting for the lullaby, just like you once were. One evening, far from any shore, a sailor drifted on quiet waters. His ship had lost its way, and though the stars blinked above him, he felt more lost than the compass needle that spun without end. He had forgotten why he set sail, forgotten who he used to be. Only the wind, soft and strange, seemed to know. And then, in the hush between waves, he heard it. Not the sound of land, not the call of another voice, but a song, low, ancient, kind. It moved through him like warmth in cold bones. He sat still, afraid to breathe, afraid it might vanish if he did, but it didn't. It stayed, and in that moment, he remembered something. Not a fact, but a feeling. He remembered hope, not as an answer, but as a direction. And when morning came, his ship began to move again. Not because the sea had changed, but because he had. That is the gift of the lullaby. It doesn't rescue, it doesn't fix. It follows, gently, until you're ready to rise. They say that if you visit the sea on a quiet night, a real one, not just silent, but listening, you might feel something stirred deep in your chest. Not fear, not longing, something older, something like memory, something like love. And if you hum, even one note, the waves will carry it far beyond what you can imagine. To a stranger who needs it, to a reef that remembers, to a mermaid whose song became the sea's own voice. Because the lullaby never needed a stage. It only needed hearts that were willing to carry it forward. Hearts like yours. So now, as this story draws to a quiet close, remember, this isn't the end. It's the moment before someone else begins to sing. And if you're very still, you might hear them already humming, already healing, already part of the song.